My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the phone. The message was 43 seconds long, and those 43 seconds destroyed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I played it 3 times just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. His voice was unmistakable, clear, confident, talking to someone else about money. About a lot of money. About things that made my stomach drop like I was falling off a cliff. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand what came before. You need to understand how I got here. My name is Ashley, and for the last 8 years, I've been married to Michael. Or at least, I thought I was married to Michael. Let me back up further. Let me tell you about the woman I was before that voice message. 3 years ago, everything was exactly as it should be. We lived in a beautiful 2-story colonial in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. The kind of house with a wraparound porch and a tire swing hanging from the oak tree in the front yard. Not that we had kids. That was the one thing we'd been trying to work on. But some things take time. Michael always said that too. It'll happen when it happens, Ash. We're young. We've got time. He was an accountant, which meant he was methodical about everything. Organized. He kept spreadsheets for our household budget, our retirement planning, our vacation savings. I loved that about him. I came from a chaotic family where my dad never paid the bills on time, and my mom just didn't care. Michael represented stability. I worked as a case manager for the county social services department. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. I helped families navigate the system, connected them with resources, sometimes literally pulled people back from the edge. My boss, Derek, used to tell me I had a gift for making people feel heard. You actually listen, he'd say. Most people just wait for their turn to talk. Michael listened too. Or so I thought. Every evening, when I came home exhausted from dealing with other people's crises, he'd be there. He'd have made dinner, usually something simple but delicious. We'd sit at our kitchen island with its granite countertop and stainless steel everything, and I'd decompress. He'd ask about my day, actually ask, and actually care. And for those couple of hours before bed, the weight would lift. How was the Jenkins family? He'd ask. Or, did you ever find housing for that woman you were worried about? We got them into transitional housing, I'd say, and he'd nod, like this was the most important news he'd heard all day. 3 kids. The youngest has asthma, but at least they're not in the car anymore. Michael would reach across the counter and squeeze my hand. You're doing good work, Ashley. Really good work. Those moments made me feel like we were a team, like we were building something solid together. Our life was a perfect little ecosystem. We'd refinanced the house 2 years into the marriage, locked in a great rate. We had 2 cars, his sensible Lexus and my Subaru. We went to the gym on weekends, took vacations to places like Cancun and San Francisco. We hosted dinner parties. My mother-in-law, Linda, came over every other Sunday for lunch, and while she could be critical, she had opinions about everything from my cooking to the way I organized the spice rack. Michael always had my back. Mom, Ash is doing fine, he'd say when she'd make some comment. He was protective like that. Our sex life was good too. Not fireworks every night, but consistent, affectionate. He'd come up behind me while I was making coffee in the morning and kiss the back of my neck. We'd hold hands in the car. In the summer, we'd sit on the porch swing and talk for hours about nothing. The way the light looked at dusk, whether we wanted to paint the guest bedroom blue or green, whether we should finally bite the bullet and get a dog. I thought I knew him. That was the thing. I thought I knew every detail of Michael's interior landscape. I knew he was terrified of his father, who'd been distant and critical, and had died when Michael was 24. I knew he had a weird habit of organizing his socks by color. I knew he cried during movies, but would never admit it. I knew his coffee order by heart: medium roast, 1 sugar, a splash of cream. I knew he sometimes stayed up late looking at his college photos and got a little nostalgic and sad. I thought I knew him, but last Tuesday, something shifted. It was small, almost nothing. The kind of thing that would make most people not even notice. We were lying in bed. It was around 11, and we were both reading. Michael had his iPad, and he was supposedly checking some work emails. I was finishing a chapter in my book when his phone buzzed. Just a quick vibration on the nightstand. He glanced at it, and something flickered across his face. A micro expression, a tightness around his eyes. Then he picked the phone up and stepped out of the bedroom to take the call. "Hey," he said into the phone in the hallway, his voice different somehow. Lighter. "Yeah, I can talk for a second." I tried not to listen. I really did. But our house isn't that big, and voices carry. I heard him say, "No, she's asleep," which made my chest go tight because I wasn't asleep, and I was right there, and why would he say that? It felt like a small lie. A test run for a bigger lie. He spoke for maybe 5 minutes, his voice low, and then he came back to bed like nothing had happened. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Derek from work," he said. "Just following up on a client thing." Derek? That wasn't right. Michael's Derek was a senior partner at the accounting firm where Michael worked. They didn't typically call after 11 at night about client issues, but I didn't push it. I told myself I was being paranoid. That's what I did a lot. I second-guessed my own instincts. I'd grown up with a father who lied constantly, who made up elaborate explanations for small things, and I'd learned to just accept whatever version of reality people presented to me. It was easier, less conflict. I went back to my book, but I couldn't focus on the words anymore. The next day was normal. Michael left for work at his usual time, kissed me goodbye like always, and I didn't think about the phone call, or I tried not to. We had dinner that night with some friends from our gym, a couple named Jennifer and Brandon. They were fun, always full of stories about their renovation project and their plans to move closer to Jennifer's parents in Cincinnati. I found myself watching Michael across the table, seeing if I could detect anything different about him. But he was charming and engaged and exactly as he always was. I felt ridiculous for suspecting anything at all. By Friday, I'd almost completely dismissed it. Almost. But that's when I decided to ask him about it again, more directly this time. We were in the car on the way to the grocery store, and I just came out with it. "Hey, that call on Tuesday night," I said. "From Derek." Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Just barely. Just enough that I noticed. "What about it?" he asked. "What was it about?" "You said it was work, but Derek doesn't usually call that late, does he?" He was quiet for a moment. Too quiet. "It was nothing," he said finally. "Just some quarterly reporting stuff." He was stressed about the deadline. You know how Derek gets. But I didn't know how Derek gets, because Michael had never mentioned Derek calling him late at night before. And the way Michael said it felt rehearsed, like he'd already prepared the explanation, like he'd known I might ask and had his story ready. That's when the first real alarm bell started ringing. Not loud, not yet, but insistent, a small, persistent sound in the back of my mind, telling me that something wasn't right, that the world I thought I lived in, the solid, stable, perfectly ordered world, might have a crack in it. A small one, but cracks expand. I didn't know how right I was. I spent the whole weekend in a fog. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just kept replaying that moment in the car over and over, analyzing his words, his tone, the way his hands had tightened on the steering wheel. Derek calling late at night. Derek being stressed. It all felt like a performance, like Michael had rehearsed lines in a play I wasn't supposed to know about. By Sunday evening, I'd convinced myself I was being crazy, paranoid, seeing patterns that didn't exist. Michael was at the gym, at least that's what he said, and I was sitting on the couch with a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago, staring at nothing. My mother, Carol, had texted me earlier, asking if we wanted to come to Thanksgiving dinner at her place in Cleveland, about 2 hours away. Usually I loved Thanksgiving. The planning, the cooking, the family chaos. But the idea of sitting around a table pretending everything was fine made my stomach hurt. Michael came home around 6, all endorphins and post-workout energy. He kissed the top of my head as he passed by, heading straight to the shower like always. I listened to the water run, listened to him moving around upstairs, and felt absolutely nothing. That scared me more than anything else. When had my husband become a stranger? He came down in clean clothes, his hair still damp, and sat beside me on the couch. He smelled like his body wash, that expensive stuff he always used. Familiar, but also not. "Hey," he said. "You okay? You seem off." There it was. The opening. I could ask him directly. I could say, "Michael, is something going on? And please don't lie to me." But instead, I did what I'd done my whole life. I swallowed my doubt. "Just tired," I said. "Work was brutal this week." He nodded and turned on the TV, and we sat there together in silence. The blue glow of the screen, the only light in the room. I felt like I was drowning while he sat right beside me, completely oblivious. Or worse, completely aware and choosing not to acknowledge it. Monday morning came. Michael left for work at 7:30 a.m., like always. I called in sick to work, which I never do. My boss, Derek, asked if I was okay. "Just a migraine," I lied. "Should be better tomorrow." But I wasn't sick. I was possessed. I went upstairs to our bedroom, to Michael's desk in the corner, where he kept his work files and personal stuff. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might break through my ribs. I felt like a criminal. I felt like a sneak. But I also felt like someone whose house was on fire, and nobody would tell her where the smoke was coming from. I opened his desk drawer. Bills, tax documents, warranties for appliances. Nothing. I checked his nightstand. Same thing. I stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, wondering what I was even looking for. A second phone? A stack of love letters? Evidence written in ink that my husband was a liar? I went back downstairs and poured another cup of coffee I didn't want. I was being ridiculous. I was the kind of woman I'd always judged, the paranoid, insecure type who went through her husband's things. Wasn't I? But then I remembered that micro-expression on his face when his phone buzzed. That was real. That tightness in his voice when he said she was asleep. That was real. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer, the friend we'd had dinner with. "Hey girl, Brandon and I are thinking about doing a guys' night/girls' night next weekend. You in?" I stared at the text. The old Ashley would have been excited about that. The old Ashley would have started planning a fun night out, probably suggesting wine bar downtown. But the new Ashley, the one who'd been born sometime between Tuesday night and right now, just felt tired. "Sounds fun," I typed back. "Let me check with Michael." As soon as I hit send, my phone rang. It was my mom. "Hey, honey," she said. "Just wanted to make sure you and Michael are coming to Thanksgiving. I'm making the green bean casserole you like, and I want to make sure I have enough chairs." My mom, Carol, who'd always been kind of a mess, but who loved me unconditionally, who'd taught me early on that the world wasn't a safe place and that people would disappoint you, but you had to keep showing up anyway. "We'll be there," I said. "Good. Michael's a good man, Ashley. You're lucky." After I hung up, I sat with that statement. Michael's a good man. Was he? Or had I just been too blinded by the trappings of a good life to see who he actually was? I needed to know. The need was like a physical thing, pressing against my chest. I couldn't live like this. Half in a marriage, half out, suspended in this terrible limbo of doubt. So I did something I'm not proud of. Something I'd never done before. I logged into our shared Google account, the one we used for household stuff like the Google Home and shared photos. And then I scrolled to his location history. There he was, a little blue dot on the map, at his office in downtown Columbus, where he was supposed to be. But below that, in the history, I could see everywhere he'd been over the past week. Home, office, gym, coffee shop on 4th Street on Tuesday, a hotel on the highway. A hotel. A hotel called the Riverside Inn, 14 miles from our house, on Tuesday night. The same night he took the call from Derek. The room started to spin. I put my hand on the kitchen counter to steady myself. A hotel. Michael had been to a hotel. Not for work, not for any reason I could think of. Just a hotel, on a random Tuesday night, while telling me he was at home with me. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I pulled up his credit card statement, the one we both had access to because we shared everything, or so I thought, and started scrolling. There. Riverside Inn. $187 for one night. And before that, another hotel. The Hilton on the south side. $210. And another one, going back, going back. At least a dozen hotel charges over the past 2 months. All hidden in the middle of the statement, where you wouldn't notice them unless you were looking. All paid for with his personal card, not the joint account. The coffee I'd been drinking came up. I barely made it to the sink before I was sick. 2 months. He'd been going to hotels for 2 months. My husband, the man I'd built a life with, the man who made me dinner and squeezed my hand and asked about the Jenkins family. He was lying to me. And not just lying, actively deceiving me, planning his deceptions, using hotel rooms and fake work calls and practiced explanations. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. When my phone buzzed, I jumped like I'd been electrocuted. A text from Michael. "Hey, just checking in. How's the migraine?" I stared at those words. How's the migraine? Like he cared, like he was a good husband checking on his sick wife. Like he wasn't a liar. Like he wasn't currently sitting at his desk at work, probably texting me on a break before heading to his next meeting, his next deception, his next hotel room. I didn't text back. Instead, I did something else. Something that felt like stepping off a cliff. I opened my laptop and created a new email address. An anonymous one. Gmail. Nothing traceable. Then I sent Michael an email from that address. "I know about the hotels. I know about all of it. We need to talk." I hit send before I could think about it, before I could talk myself out of it. My heart was hammering. This was it. This was the moment when everything changed. I'd opened the door, and now there was no closing it. I waited for 30 seconds. A minute. 5 minutes. Nothing. He didn't respond, which meant either he hadn't seen it yet, or he'd seen it and was panicking, or it had gone to spam, or... My phone buzzed. A call. From Michael. He was calling me. "Hey," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm coming home," he said. His voice was flat, controlled, very different from the light, cheerful tone he usually used. "We need to talk." "Yeah," I said. "We do." He hung up without saying anything else. I looked around my kitchen, at the granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, and the beautiful life I'd built with a man who was apparently a complete stranger. I had maybe 20 minutes before he got here. 20 minutes before the door closed on the old version of my life forever. I sat down at the kitchen table and waited. Hashtag finalny chast. 20 minutes felt like 20 seconds and 20 hours at the same time. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands folded in front of me, staring at nothing. The anonymous email I'd sent was still sitting in my drafts. I'd copied the text, but never actually confirmed sending it, so technically I hadn't done anything yet. Except I had. By calling him, by demanding he come home, by acknowledging that I knew something, I'd lit the fuse. There was no putting it back out. I heard the Lexus pull into the driveway at 12:47 p.m. I knew the exact time because I kept looking at the clock on the microwave, watching the minutes tick by like a countdown. He parked crooked, half on the driveway and half on the grass, which was so unlike Michael that it terrified me more than anything else could have. Michael was the kind of man who would circle a parking lot for 5 minutes to get the perfect spot. The front door opened. He came in without taking off his shoes, which he never did. He walked straight into the kitchen where I was sitting, and for the first time in 8 years of marriage, I looked at him and saw a stranger. Not metaphorically. Actually, genuinely, I didn't recognize the person standing in front of me. His face was pale. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle working. He was still wearing his work clothes, the blue button-down shirt and gray slacks, but they looked wrinkled, like he'd slept in them. There were sweat stains under his arms. "What did you do?" he asked. His voice was quiet, controlled, but underneath it was something else. Panic, anger, fear. "I didn't do anything yet," I said. I sent you an email from an anonymous account. I didn't expect you to actually come home. He sat down across from me, and the chair scraped against the floor with a sound that made my teeth ache. You went through my location history, he said. Not a question. The Google account is shared, I said. It's our account. That's not what I'm asking. I met his eyes. Yes. I went through your location history. And then I looked at your credit card statement. And then I found the hotels, the Riverside Inn, the Hilton, at least a dozen charges over 2 months. Michael put his head in his hands. When he looked back up, his eyes were red. I need you to listen to me very carefully, he said, and I need you to not interrupt me until I'm done. Can you do that? I nodded. He took a breath. I'm not having an affair. The relief that flooded through me was so intense and so immediate that I actually laughed. A short, sharp bark that came out of nowhere. Then I stopped, because something in his expression told me that relief was premature. Then what? I asked. The hotels, he said slowly, were for work. That's a lie. It's not. But I understand why you think it is. He stood up and started pacing. Ashley, I've been looking into something for the past 3 months. Something that I found out at work, and I didn't know what to do about it, so I started investigating on my own. What are you talking about? My heart was still racing, but now it was a different kind of racing. Not relief. Confusion mixed with dread. Derek, he said. My boss, Derek. He's been embezzling from client accounts. Large amounts. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. I found it by accident. A discrepancy in the quarterly reports that didn't add up. And when I started digging deeper, I realized it went back years. Years, Ashley. I stared at him. You're telling me you went to hotels to investigate your boss? I went to hotels because I needed somewhere to work without anyone knowing what I was doing, somewhere I could make phone calls and review documents without Derek or anyone else at the firm finding out. He ran his hand through his hair. I've been trying to gather evidence, real evidence, not just suspicions, enough to take to the authorities. Why didn't you just tell me? The question came out louder than I intended. Because you work in social services. Because you're mandatory reporter. Because if I told you what I'd found, you would have had an ethical and legal obligation to report it, and that would have blown everything open before I had enough evidence to actually prove it. I sat back in my chair. Michael, you could have just— I could have just what? He interrupted, and there was an edge to his voice now. Told you and risked you losing your career? Told you and risked having this conversation with lawyers and investigators instead of just you and me? I was trying to protect you. By lying to me? By going to hotels and telling me it was work? I went to hotels to make phone calls to forensic accountants, to document everything, to build a case that would hold up in court. He stopped pacing and looked at me. I was trying to do the right thing the right way, and I couldn't tell you because I didn't want to put you in a position where you had to choose between your job and your husband. The anger I'd been feeling started to deflate, replaced by something more complicated. Confusion, hurt, but also a tiny, growing sense of something else. A sense that maybe I'd gotten this wrong. Maybe he wasn't the villain in this story. I need proof, I said. I need you to show me something. Because right now, I'm supposed to just take your word for it. And your word hasn't been worth very much lately. Michael nodded like he'd expected this. He went to the garage and came back with a laptop I'd never seen before. He opened it up and turned it toward me. What I saw made my stomach drop all over again. Email chains between Derek and several other people. People I recognized as senior partners at the firm. Requests for wire transfers. Coded language about client distributions and special arrangements. Bank statements with 6-figure sums moving between accounts. And underneath all of that, meticulous notes in Michael's handwriting documenting everything, with dates and times and sources. I was going to go to the FBI, Michael said quietly. I've been talking to an agent named Patricia Summers. She's been helping me understand what I'm looking at and how to present it in a way that's legally sound. That's who was calling me that night, not Derek from work. Agent Summers, calling from her personal phone because she wanted to keep it off the record. I looked through document after document. The scope of it was staggering. We were talking about millions of dollars. Millions. And Michael had been sitting on this, documenting it, building a case, while I'd been sitting at home thinking he was having an affair. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked again. But this time it came out differently. Not angry, just tired. "Because I needed you to have plausible deniability," he said. "If this goes to court, when it goes to court, you need to be able to say honestly that you didn't know, that you were shocked by the revelations just like everyone else. It protects you." "It doesn't protect me," I said. "It leaves me in the dark. It makes me feel crazy. It makes me not trust you." "I know," he said. "And I'm sorry. I made a bad call. I thought I was protecting you, but I was actually just lying to you. And that's on me." I closed the laptop. I needed to think. I needed to process this. I'd gone from thinking my marriage was over to discovering my husband was a whistleblower, conducting an investigation that would probably destroy his career and possibly land his boss in federal prison. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now I go to the FBI with everything. Probably tomorrow or the day after. I have a meeting scheduled with Agent Summers." He sat back down across from me. "And then there's going to be a lot of fallout. The firm will probably implode. I'll probably lose my job. There might be lawsuits. It's going to be messy." "Are you prepared for that?" "No," he said honestly. "But I can't not do this. I can't go to work every day knowing what I know and just pretend it's not happening. That's not who I am." I thought about this. I thought about the version of Michael I'd been so angry at, the version who'd been lying and sneaking around. And I thought about the version I was looking at now, the one who'd been trying to do something hard and complicated and right, even though it meant deceiving the person he loved. "I need to call in sick tomorrow," I said, "and the day after that, if I have to. I need to be here when this happens. I need to understand what's going on." He nodded. "I expected that. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," I said. "We still have a lot to talk about the lying, about the hotels, about how you made decisions that affected both of us without actually consulting me." "I know. But first, I need to see everything, all of it. I need to understand exactly what you've been doing and why." We spent the next 4 hours going through every document, every email, every note. Michael walked me through the paper trail that led back 7 years. 7 years of Derek funneling client money into offshore accounts. 7 years of falsifying records. 7 years of theft on a scale that made my head hurt. Michael had found it because he'd been doing a routine audit on one of their biggest clients, a manufacturing company, and noticed that the quarterly distributions didn't match what the client's own records showed. He'd asked Derek about it casually, and Derek had given him an explanation that didn't quite add up. So Michael had started digging. And the more he dug, the more he found. "Why didn't you go to the police immediately?" I asked. "Because I wasn't sure I was reading it correctly," Michael said. "And because I knew that if I went to the authorities with bad information, it would destroy Derek and the firm even if he was innocent. I needed to be absolutely certain." By the time we finished, it was after 4 in the afternoon. My head was pounding. The life I thought I had, the stable, predictable life with the good husband and the nice house and the plan for the future, had shifted into something else entirely. But it was still there. Michael was still there. He was just more complicated than I'd thought. "There's one more thing," Michael said quietly, "and this is the part that terrifies me more than anything else." "What?" "I sent Derek a message yesterday. Not directly. Through an encrypted app that can't be traced. I told him I knew what he'd done, and I told him that I was going to the authorities, and I gave him 48 hours to turn himself in voluntarily." My blood went cold. "You did what?" "I gave him a chance to do the right thing," Michael said. "To own up to what he'd done before the FBI came knocking on his door. I thought maybe he had some conscience buried in there somewhere." "And?" He responded this morning. He said that if I went to the authorities, he would accuse me of being the embezzler. He said he had documentation that made it look like I was the one moving the money. He said he would bury me. The room tilted. Can he do that? I don't know, Michael admitted, but it's a threat. And the FBI needs to know about it before I go to them, so they understand that there's potential retaliation. Agent Summers already warned me that this might happen. I stood up and started pacing, just like Michael had done earlier. So what you're telling me is that your boss, this person you've worked for 8 years, is essentially a criminal, and he's now threatening to frame you for his crimes. Yes. And you're going to the FBI anyway. Yes. And our lives are about to become a complete nightmare. Probably, Michael said. Yes. I looked at him sitting at the kitchen table, looking exhausted and scared, and nothing like the man I'd married. And I realized something. He was the man I'd married. He was just the man I'd married, plus all these other complications and fears and moral dilemmas that I hadn't known about. The love I'd felt for him hadn't disappeared. It had just gotten more complicated. Okay, I said. Okay, we're going to do this. But we need a lawyer. A good one. Not just for the FBI stuff, but because Derek's threat means we need to be prepared for a legal battle. Michael looked at me with something like relief. You're not leaving me? I'm furious with you, I said. But I'm not leaving you. Not over this. The next morning, Michael went to the FBI office downtown. I waited at home, unable to focus on anything. I called my boss and said I needed to take a personal week. He didn't push back. By afternoon, Michael was back. The meeting had gone well, he said. Agent Summers had taken all the documentation. They were opening a formal investigation. Derek was going to be arrested within the next few days. What about his threat? I asked. About framing you? Agent Summers said that Derek's documentation is sloppy. The evidence is there, but it's circumstantial at best. And more importantly, Derek has no motive for stealing the money. He's an accountant making 6 figures. I'm an accountant making $250,000 a year. The embezzlement is in the millions. It doesn't make sense that I would do it. But he might still try. He might, Michael agreed. And if he does, we'll deal with it. Together. Derek was arrested 4 days later. It was all over the Columbus News. Local accounting firm partner, charged with multi-million-dollar embezzlement. The firm announced that they were hiring a forensic accountant to review all their accounts. Several clients filed lawsuits. The partners who hadn't been involved in the theft scrambled to salvage the firm's reputation. Michael was fired, technically, though the letter they sent him acknowledged that he'd acted with integrity and offered him a severance package that was more generous than I would have expected. They also offered him a letter of recommendation, which seemed absurd given the circumstances, but which he accepted anyway. Derek did try to blame Michael. He hired a lawyer and filed a countersuit claiming that Michael had forged documents and framed him as retaliation for being passed over for a promotion. But the evidence was overwhelming. The FBI had traced the money. They had emails. They had forensic data from Derek's computer. The case went to federal court. Michael testified. I sat in the courtroom and watched my husband explain, in clear and measured tones, how he'd discovered the theft and how he'd documented it. Derek's lawyer tried to tear his testimony apart, but Michael was unshakable. He had the facts on his side. He had the evidence. Derek was convicted on 5 counts of wire fraud and money laundering. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. And my marriage, which I'd thought was ending in that moment when I found the hotel charges, survived. It changed. Michael lost his job and spent the next 2 months looking for work, eventually landing at a smaller firm that specialized in forensic accounting. We had to refinance the house because we needed the cash flow while he was between jobs. We canceled our vacation to San Francisco, but we survived. 3 months after Derek's conviction, Michael and I were sitting on the porch swing where we used to sit and talk about nothing. The oak tree's leaves had turned gold and red, and there was that smell in the air, the smell of October in Ohio, like wood smoke and dying leaves and the promise of winter. I'm sorry, Michael said, like he had 100 times since that day in the kitchen, for lying to you, for not trusting you with the truth. I know, I said, and I'm still angry about it sometimes, but I understand why you did it. Do you forgive me? I thought about this carefully. I'm working on it. But Michael, you have to understand something. Trust is like a vase. Once it breaks, you can glue it back together, but it's never the same. There are cracks. And sometimes the light comes through those cracks in ways that hurt. He nodded. I know. But I love you, I said. And I believe that you were trying to do the right thing, even if you did it wrong. So yes, eventually, I'll forgive you. He reached over and took my hand. We sat there in silence, watching the sunset over our neighborhood, over our house with its mortgage and its memories, over the life we'd almost lost and somehow managed to keep. The voice message that started all of this, the one where Michael was talking to Agent Summers about the money, about the evidence, about the case, never made it to me. The anonymous email I'd drafted but never sent just sat in my drafts folder until I finally deleted it weeks later. But I'd learned something. I'd learned that the people we love are always more complicated than we think. That trust requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires risk. That sometimes the worst things turn out to be the most important things, because they force us to see ourselves and each other clearly. Michael and I are still married. We never did get pregnant, and we stopped trying after that year. We got a dog instead, a golden retriever named Bailey. We still host dinner parties, though our friends' circle shifted after everything that happened. Some people couldn't handle the notoriety. Others became closer to us because of it. But sometimes, even now, I'll catch Michael making a phone call and stepping out of the room, and for just a second, my heart will seize. That's the crack in the vase. That's what happens when you discover that the person you thought you knew is someone different, someone more, someone capable of deception in the name of what they believe is right. The real secret my husband was keeping wasn't about infidelity. It was about integrity. And sometimes, those two things are harder to untangle than you'd think.